Good morning, everybody, and pity about the grey morning we have in Galway, but we managed to get through the rain and get here on time. My name is Dermot Donovan, and as Sheila referenced a little while ago about our multiple identities, I'm going to reveal a couple of my identities this morning to you. One of those being as Head of Department of Creative Education, and the other being a project manager for a project called eWill. So I'm talking today about embedding ePortfolios in programme delivering across our School of Design and Creative Arts, with a particular focus on a number of departments. And the project I'm working on has involved a wider team, and just to acknowledge that before I start, there are a number of academics, Kate Dunn, James Corbett, and also an educational technologist, Anne-Marie Burke, who's been working on the project with us. And Anne-Marie is responsible for a lot of the design elements of what I'll be demonstrating later, and has been a major part of this journey around the discovery around PebblePad, and I suppose really a case study around the proof of concept of it. So a little bit just about the context of the programmes and the departments that I'm referencing here. Within the School of Design, within the ATU, we have 2 campuses and 3 departments. One of those campuses and departments is centred in Galway City, and that's looking very much at the creative industries. Everything from film, broadcasting, animation, publishing, fashion, interiors, art and craft, and very creative outputs, but also very much focused now on industry and the needs of those creative industries in our regions. A key part of these programmes also is that opportunity for placement, and that's a theme that will come across all of the departments that I'm going to reference. The other campus that we work in is the ATU Connemara campus, and that has a focus on furniture design and wood technology based in Letterfrack, now called ATU Connemara. And this area and the focus of these programmes for over 35 years has been a leading centre for furniture, for bespoke furniture, wood technology, architectural interiors, crafts, digital design, process engineering, and also more recently apprenticeships. And another key part of the delivery of these programmes is industry placements. And I'll just rest there on the industry placements because the project, the Education Work Integrated Learning, is a HEA-funded multi-campus fund project. And that has been specifically focused on smaller campuses to try to make them more sustainable. And one of the projects that led out from that was a move towards year-long work placements for year 3 of students on these programmes. And they'll begin those work placements in September. So a lot of the project that I'm working on has been looking at the infrastructure that we need to support students while they're out on work placement. And the last department, which is the department I'm head of, is the Department of Creative Education, and that has a specific focus on initial teacher education, particularly post-primary undergraduate degrees. And the subject areas we work with there with students are in construction studies, design and communication graphics, or DCG, and art. And they're leaving cert subjects. So the students leaving those programmes are qualified to teach those subjects in post-primary schools. And a key part of that is the area of school placement. So that's another key theme, that it's that work integrated learning aspect of all these programmes. And we also work in conjunction with the Teaching and Learning Office in the MA in Teaching and Learning itself. So looking at those 3 departments, the 2 sort of themes that run through them are the creative and practical aspects of the work that students do, and also the work-based learning that takes place. And trying to map and contextualise and recognise the learning that takes place in those very diverse environments is a key challenge for students and for academics. So this has led us to looking more deeply, I suppose, at ePortfolio, and we've always had elements of ePortfolio in our programme, and I'll reference some of the platforms that we've used previously, but we've begun to look and consider what the broader context of ePortfolio is. And we know that there's an increase in interest, and we've just discussed it this morning briefly around ePortfolio learning and within a higher education context. And Farrell would have seen, the use of ePortfolios both supporting work placement, for reflection, for assessment, and also developing employability skills. And these are key sort of areas that we'll be focusing on in our ePortfolio. And of course, they're well aligned for the type of programs that we've been looking at and talking about just now. So looking then at ePortfolios and trying to get a definition and a framework around what they mean to people, because ePortfolio means many different things to many different people and different contexts, different programs, different disciplines. But they are generally a way of gathering evidence of broad competence and skills. So reflecting that we have different learners, we have different environments to learn, we have different lecturers teaching in different ways, but also we have environments, I suppose, outside of the classroom and learning taking place outside of the classroom. And not just outside the classroom, but outside the university. So what does that look like, and how can we gather that evidence? Supporting that idea of self-regulated autonomous learning while promoting digital literacy. So there's a key digital element in using ePortfolios. And we know that, and I'll come back to it, that we have digital natives. That also is an assumption we need to be careful with around the competencies of those digital natives, and are they aligned with the competencies of the digital tools that we use. But they are very adept at developing new skills in those areas. And that idea of autonomous learning, recognizing that people will actually learn different things even in the same environment and in the same classroom. So how do we recognize that and allow for that? And some of that can be recognized through UDL as well, which we've done a lot of work in the university here with. And then enhancing future employment prospects, of course, because as we've said just there on the finish up with Sheila's talk, is that idea that employers want to see that diversity of learning that students are actually taking. And then encourage self-reflective and critically over the lifelong learning. I'll come back to reflection in a minute, because we talk a lot about reflection, and we reflected this morning with our first keynote, and we don't sometimes know how to, I suppose, put a framework around reflection for our students and scaffold the reflection for our students. But also, we all need and have different interpretations of reflection. And Scully's paper on ePortfolio, Scully et al., that's a really good paper, because it really does critically look at ePortfolio and the way in which they're used in Irish higher education. But they say an ePortfolio is a vehicle to enable students to collate, create and reflect on their practice. So we'll just have a little think about that reflection part, because I think this is a key part of the use of portfolio, but also about how students can and should reflect, and how we want them to reflect. So I took some notes from the NCCA from 2015, and the reason I took them from the NCCA, which is the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, those are the notes from the reform of the junior cycle. So this is looking at students from 12 to 15 years of age, and they were talking about the importance of reflection. And we still talk about the importance of reflection when students come to us at 18 and 20 and mature and beyond, and we still have a struggle with that, and we see different cohorts of students with a different ability perhaps sometimes to reflect. So it's really important that we try to break that down in a way that's manageable for students. So just the 4 points that the NCCA said was it encourages students to take responsibility for their learning and self-efficacy. It raises awareness of knowledge and skills gained. It increases self-esteem and develops capacity to recognise quality in work. And I think we would all say that these are really important traits for our students to become particularly well-developed, rounded individuals with an ability to reflect on their own personal development as well as their educational journey. And 2 parts that I just want to think and get you to think about on that is the instructors, okay, as in our lecturing team and our academics. We must have an appreciation of what is meant by that reflection, and equally our learners and our students need to be scaffolded in developing skills such as critical thinking and their metacognition. So it's a two-way transaction. We need to have a clear understanding about what it is, and we need to scaffold students in their reflection. And I think that that is something that we need to be aware of, particularly around this area of ePortfolio learning. So looking at some of the challenges then that I suppose our journey, and it's been a journey for us, because I think when we started this project we were looking at different platforms, looking at, I suppose, different mechanisms to transition and transform the way that we're doing things and the way that our students are engaging on placement in particular. It has brought us through, I suppose, some interesting challenges, and it's very important that anyone who's considering an ePortfolio approach at programme level needs to be aware of those challenges. So number one is the success and sustainability require extensive planning preparation and a substantial commitment from all stakeholders. So it is important that a programme board would take ownership and responsibility for integrating ePortfolio. And it's important that it doesn't just rest on one person's shoulders too. There's always going to be tensions between development and evaluative aspects. So that conversation between how we do things now, how we want to do things in the future, how we want to do things using an ePortfolio approach can be a challenge. And there are tensions that need to be recognised and overcome. There's a lack sometimes of development of learning activities and instructional methods that facilitate true engagement with the reflective process. So again, how do we ensure that we're helping students to engage with that process of reflection? And then, of course, whatever technology we use, it's really important that it should not supersede pedagogy. So it has to enhance what we're doing. And that's a really important aspect of our ePortfolio as well. So, you know, if you think about it as a typical project plan, there's a planning, there's analysis, there's design, there's implementation, and then testing and maintenance. And what I would preface everything that I'm saying today is we're in pilot stage. This is not a completed project. We're in stage 2 of a 3-stage process, and really the big stage for us is about to take place in September. So we're really just at the beginning of understanding how this is working and evaluating it as well. So I will preface that in everything that I'm saying. But we've done a lot of, I suppose, scoping, and during our journey, we've gone from Ireland to the UK to Australia in terms of our research, talking to people who've used both the platform and ePortfolios, and trying to make sure that we don't, I suppose, fall into some of these pitfalls that we're seeing here. So, and again, reflecting on what Sheila mentioned this morning, I get completely mixed up with the years at the moment. So when I say 21, 22, that could be anything from 2019 to 2022, to be honest. I'm a little bit uncertain where we started and where this journey was and where we are even now in it. But we have previously, I suppose, dabbled with Mahara and Weebly in particular. Now, they're open source ePortfolio platforms, and there are issues around data protection, student licenses, etc., that we ran into some challenges with previously. But we also used our learning from those to see, well, could we find anything else that's more appropriate? And we came across PebblePad about 3 years ago initially, and it piqued our interest, and we came back to it about a year later and really started to, I suppose, look at it as a proof of concept to see how it could work. But it is important that we're not just talking about a creative ePortfolio. It's beyond that, and trying to expand the understanding of it to looking at learning and assessment, looking at students on their work-based learning. And I mentioned Pebble Pocket here, this idea of student mobility. How can students learn on the go? How can they capture their learning on the go, which is a really important part of it. This is your basic interface with PebblePad. It is, I'll show it to you in a second. But basically, you're coming into the platform and you have resources and assets. And resources are things that we give to the students in terms of templates and workbooks. And assets are, once they create and start developing those, they start to call them assets. And it's how just some of the terminology that PebblePad use. So when we started to look at the proof of concept, what happened then was we suddenly realized we have some challenges in terms of user ability, interface, ease of access, etc. So one of the 2 big things that we did was we started immediately talking with IT services. And I do want to just say thank you to Donald McGinty and to Gary Brennan in IT services in particular, who've helped us support this project to get it integrated into Moodle, which was a key part. So ease of access for students, single sign-on, easy to find. These are key parts that we recognize that if we don't make it easy for students, we're going to create problems for ourselves. And then in terms of the GDPR, we have an agreement in place and worked with the Data Protection Office here in the ATU. And that again is a key part of it, because PebblePad, this data is owned by the students, and it's only given to us and released to us when they decide they want to. So we can see what they're working on, assuming that they give us the insight into it. But they also take a PebblePad license with them on graduation, so they can continue to use PebblePad, and as long as the institute is still a customer of PebblePad, it's a free license. And then we went and discovered we were running into procurement issues. So in order to give confidence to everybody using that we weren't going to have to change this technology in 2 years' time, we looked to secure the technology. So we put in place a small team, including Karina and Jessica from the Teaching and Learning Office and IT Services. And I also want to pay tribute to Sharon Boyle, who's an existing user of PebblePad in the Mayo campus for a long number of years. And we bent her ear quite a bit over the project, trying to see how it was being used there and the possibilities of it. And so we're now about to put in place a nature framework across the ATU, which really secures it for a long period of time for us to really have confidence in the technology, and also to create a working collaboration with the PebblePad team themselves. And so we went for an incremental approach to this in terms of implementing it across first and second year this year. So we've brought PebblePad to about 140 students. We're looking at a creative ePortfolio, looking at a reflective practice being built into it, and also looking at the preparation for and during industry placement. And these are some of the things that I think we all are aware of, and particularly with coming out of a pandemic and during a pandemic and trying to make change during a pandemic when, you know, a lot of change was taking place. Sometimes it's a good time to make change, but it still has its challenges, particularly around technology fatigue. We have multiple technologies that we're starting to use over the last number of years, and here's another one. So you have that pushback straight away and the awareness around that. There's a resistance to change and staff workload that is ongoing always and challenging. That ease of access and integration into the IT infrastructure is a key part of it, but again, there's a process of change that needs to take place. Procurement and learning about procurement processes and going through a tender process, which took about 6 or 7 months to do. That was a key element of it. Assuming higher education, digital natives, our digital natives is something that we just need to be careful with, because they still need scaffolding. They still need proper training in any IT software that they're going to use. And then, of course, that need to communicate various features of the chosen software on a gradual, cumulative basis is a key part of it. And just in terms of the supports, I'm going to finish up with the slides. I think this is the second last one. But in terms of the supports, having an educational technologist collaborating with the SMEs, so our subject matter experts, is absolutely fundamental to this for us. So if we're looking at a sort of large piece of our program, it's really important that it's done designed in a way that's meaningful for our lecturers and for our students. So there's the design of the PebblePad resources themselves. There's tiered and prescribed training for our academics. There's a use of student mentor, which was an absolutely fantastic resource, and hopefully one that we keep using and keep employing across the university, because they were absolutely key in terms of supporting each individual student with queries that they would have had. And then, of course, we've got our own digital resources within PebblePad and also tech support from PebblePad. That's a really important part of the project for us. And just looking at the next steps, we're now looking at industry placement, resources for when students go out on placement. We're looking at things like journals, reports, evidence of learning. We're also now looking at school placement and how we can actually start to use PebblePad for school placement, because at the moment we're using a very complex data management system, and this should be able to streamline a lot of that for us. And we're also evaluating it. So we've got ethical approval to gather data from our students and our learners, particularly around the use of the technology platform, but also their impact on their learning. And at the moment, what we're seeing is a typical line that we're seeing is, once we get over the hump of learning a new technology, yes, we're liking what we're seeing. But there is that part that they have to be brought over and handheld with it. So at the moment, we're seeing some nice feedback, positive feedback, but again, some critical aspects around the flexibility of the platform that we need to look at ourselves as we sort of develop this, and certainly it'll be a cyclical, reflexive practice for us as well. So there's plenty of reading material there for people if they want to deep dive into some ePortfolio. So feel free to, I think all these slides will be available to people anyway. What I'm just going to do for the last few minutes of the presentation is just to give an insight into what it might look like. So I've chosen 3 years, and again, I'm showcasing here something that isn't my work. This is the work of Anne-Marie Burke, and work alongside with her education and academic colleagues. So typically you can do anything you like in PebblePad within the limits of the platform. But here what we're doing is just converting some of the module and assignment briefs so that the student can see the brief in PebblePad that they're going to respond to in PebblePad. So it just makes it easier. These can be put on Moodle as well, but it's much easier for the students where it's all in the one place. So here we had a brief where we asked the students to create their own ePortfolio. And what we did with the students in this particular one was we prescribed the initial creative ePortfolios. So we said to them, well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to do a statement about yourself, and we're going to give you headings for your modules. So pick out the best pieces from your modules and write a little bit about what you've learned during those modules. So these are not student ones, by the way. These are some of the actual template designs that were given to the students. But this is typically what it can look like. So you can do an About Me page, do a little bit about what yourself. So typically these would be links that you would send to an employer possibly, or if you were looking for any kind of exposure of yourself, that you could send a link to someone on it. And within this, so if you go into program modules, you can see the students then are given access to a list of their modules where they actually take a little bit of a description about what their modules are, and maybe take some photographs, images of work that they've done, and can create, so you can see a sort of a creative element coming through this portfolio. So this would be a typical creative ePortfolio, and it wouldn't be too dissimilar from an awful lot of the other platforms that you'd see. In terms of then teaching resources, so if we have student teachers, they might have their teaching resources in a place here where they might put things like their construction planning grids, their PowerPoint presentations. It can take any media files, audio, video, PowerPoint, etc. Where we brought it to in year 2 was we asked the students to develop a full ePortfolio. We also asked them to develop their CV. So, and this is a student one. So this portfolio here is in their preparation for for industry placement. So in second year, they start to research where they want to go, with a focus then on reflecting on their actual work and how it might relate to a company. So here we've got them to develop a CV within PebblePad. We've got them to start develop then their ePortfolio. And again, this was a prescribed ePortfolio we did for the second years. And we did this purposely for our second years this year because we wanted them to be familiar with the platform they'll use in third year going out. So again, it's trying to reinforce the actual platform itself. So here we just have a little bit about their modules, again, some images of the work that they do, and the idea being that we'll have students who will be quite creative, we'll have students with less creativity. It's trying to give them access to a platform that they can personalize themselves as well, which is really important. Where we see then the real value of a platform like PebblePad is where we go into third year. And in third year, the students will need to create journals, weekly journals. And here's where we can actually prescribe the journals, scaffold the students in their reflection. So we have a weekly journal specific to each week where the students are asked to describe tasks, activities you undertook this week during your work placement. They can upload images to give an idea of what they've been actually doing. They can identify areas where learning took place, document, and you can provide hints. I mean, it's not thanks, Orna. It's not that this can't be done in a way that isn't digital, but using the digital platform makes it much easier for the student. The students also have, as I mentioned, the Pebble Pocket, which allows them to be offline using the technology, and they can upload that once they're back into a Wi-Fi zone. So it makes it much easier for the students to learn and reflect on their learning on the go. And so these are the areas. And the other part then around, which I'll just show you, is the Atlas side. And this is actually the area where lecturers will go in and actually give some feedback on the journals that they're actually seeing. So in this instance here, if you go in here, you can see feedback statements. So these are the journals. You can say, I want to give some feedback. And you can, what we're doing here, I suppose, is giving some options for lecturers then to give some consistency around the feedback that they're giving. So there's feedback statements that the lecturers can take and customize to what they're seeing with the students that they're doing. We also have obviously matrix there for and a rubric for assessment that the students and staff will be able to get a sense of where they are. So it provides for an awful lot of interaction with the student and the lecturer all in the one platform. And for us, I suppose it is giving us an opportunity to bring the placement process all into the one platform. So I'm going to call it a day there. I'll be back again next year to tell you how we got on with our third years. And just to say thank you to Karina and to Jessica, and particularly, I know Jessica, I said to you earlier, I don't know how many presentations you're managing, so thank you very much for your patience with ours, and thanks Karina for the opportunity to talk to you today.
No, it's brilliant. Thanks Dermot. You've done fantastic work. I love it. I love the templates for the students. We've lots of PebblePad projects, as you know, underway.
Yeah, and it's great to see them this morning as well. Yeah,
to compare, and I think if anything, we need to build out that community together and get everyone sharing with each other.
Yeah.
What we found even in, and I see some of the chat online, Rita had given a comment. Rita, who's in our certificate in teaching and learning at the moment, and colleagues that are completing for the first time PebblePad, they're teaching and learning portfolios. Now, we haven't given them templates because they're learning as they go and they're building out. There's lots of support there, but I know there's some tricks to overcome with PebblePad, you know, just some little obstacles.
Well, what we'd hope, Karina, is that I think when we get our procurement in place, I think we have an opportunity there to bring PebblePad in for really doing some much further
troubleshooting
and training. And that's part of the contract that we'll be actually putting in place, is that training will be available from them. And I think the other opportunity, because there's different ways, so if people are doing it for themselves and professionally, there'll be a very different look to that portfolio to a student portfolio. So a professional portfolio would be a different look again to what we're talking about here, which is students trying to reflect on their own learning. But I think there's an opportunity to really, particularly with the emphasis on work-based learning and the move away, as we spoke this morning, from prescribed exams, I think there's a great opportunity as we're emerging into a new university, to really look at this across many programs, you know, and I'm talking about creative areas here and creative programs which are really lend themselves towards the visual parts here, but equally for programs in business or science could be equally, And
that's what we're going to hear next in the science area, how it has transformed the placement learning experience in medical science. And I know in Jenny is also talking about it in science, and we've examples in business and culinary arts, so it's phenomenal. So it would be great if we can see it grow across the ATU.
Absolutely.
And every student, ePortfolios for all would be amazing.
And I think we do, and we mentioned about gathering evidence from our learners. I think that is a key part of it, to see how are they finding it, how do they use it, because it can be challenging. Not everyone is good at self-directed learning. You know?
And I know, just Mark is still here. Is Mark in here?
No.
Oh, he's just stepped out.
But there are a few questions.
Oh yeah, a few questions, sorry.
Yeah, I know we're just running over time, so as brief as possible. What's the difference between this and Sway?
I don't know the full difference between this and Sway, but I think this platform has more capability than Sway, and particularly, I'm not fully familiar with Sway. It's not one that we would have thought about for work-based learning, because this has, now Sway can sit in this, and you can put Sway into PebblePad. It does sit in there, and we've done some work with Sway in it, but I don't think Sway has the capability, particularly around assessment and feedback. It wouldn't have that capability relative to the sort of what's required for work-based learning. Jessica.
Okay. And it wouldn't be a learning management tool. So, but certainly you can put it into the
it works in it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. How did you recruit student mentors?
We got them when they came. So there's student mentors across the university, and during COVID we had, I think, 12 or 14 in GMIT alone.
Yeah, we had 20 to begin with.
And then we've whittled it down to about one per school.
Now about 12.
Yeah, so
They're amazing.
yeah, they're typically graduates, just recent graduates who are recruited by the institute. So it's done centrally. Yeah, but each school has, or each campus certainly has someone with responsibility.
It was set
and
up
they're
as
fantastic.
it was set up in response to COVID initially, with Seamus Lennon coordinated, and since then it's now becoming an annual recruitment drive.
It has been, so hopefully it'll stay there. Yeah.
And we have one of our graduates. I don't know if Emma's here. Emma was originally a graduate. She was one of the first graduate mentors, and now she's a researcher here in the institute.
Okay,
Emma
brilliant.
McDonald.
Yeah.
So any other questions?
Just one final one. Can we get access to the template portfolio?
Yeah.
Get access to the template portfolio?
Yeah, so the template portfolio is all there available. So there are prescribed templates in PebblePad, lots of templates in there that you can just take out and edit very easily. So I think that the thing is, people would need the training on the PebblePad to do it. That's all it takes, really, in terms of people customizing things for themselves. So perhaps another round of training. I think we're just getting to the stage of contracts with PebblePad, so we have to wait till all those are in place. And I think once those are in place, we'll probably look at September for a new round of training.
We've also developed that capability in-house as well. So through the Learning Technology team in the Teaching and Learning Office, they've done phenomenal work on developing. I know Sean has, and Kevin and Orla, on just the whole PebblePad training.
And the thing is, anybody who's used PebblePad, I think, will attest, it's a really easy platform to actually navigate. So it doesn't take an awful lot of training to actually get people up and running, to be honest, you know.
But the key is developing the ePortfolio champion network. And we're lucky that we've colleagues like, I know Joan and Helen are about to talk now in a moment, Claire Gilson and others. So
get off the stage.
They would be our champions going forward that will support the rollout.